It was a normal weekday morning, the kind where the only real tension in the air is whether the office coffee is worth the walk or if the pre-market data is worth the screen time. Silver wasn't exploding. No sirens, no headlines, no panic on the feed. If you glanced at the ticker while waiting for your toast, it looked like a flat line, a slow, sideways crawl that felt almost too normal. But one number didn't line up with the rest. It was a tiny discrepancy, tucked away in the back pages of the delivery data, but it felt like a glitch in the physics of the day. It was the kind of detail that doesn't shout, it whispers. And once you hear that whisper, the silence of the rest of the market starts to feel heavy. My name is Jim, and I spend way too much time thinking about the silent mechanics of our lives, the systems running in the background that we only notice when something slips. I've spent years watching how commodity markets behave when they stop being polite and start being honest. I'm not a gold bug or a prophet of doom. I'm just someone who notices patterns when the crowd is looking at the scoreboard. Normally, when prices calm down, the behavior follows. The ecosystem settles. But right now, we are entering a rare, narrow window where the behavior is becoming erratic despite the calm. While the paper price everyone sees on their phone remains anchored, the physical premiums are beginning to drift, and the delivery logistics are starting to stutter. It's like watching a calm lake while knowing the current underneath has just changed direction. And then it hits you. What happens when too many people decide in the exact same moment that they don't want the cash anymore? What if they actually want the metal? What if the exit door, the one everyone assumes is always unlocked, starts to feel a little too narrow for the crowd? We spend our lives believing that markets are infinite pools of liquidity. But what if exiting a position quietly simply isn't an option anymore? That is the quiet danger of the delivery window trap. Up to this point, nothing looks broken. If you look at the surface indicators, the headlines, the major indices, everything seems to be functioning as intended. And that's usually when people stop paying attention. We've been conditioned to react only when there's a loud noise, a flash of red, or a frantic anchor on a screen. But in the world of commodities, the most profound shifts don't start with a bang. They start with a heavy silence in the places where there should be movement. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't a heated argument or a whistleblower's confession. It was just a short exchange with someone deep inside the logistics side of the physical bullion world. The people who actually handle the crates and the armored trucks. I asked a simple question about lead times for a specific type of wholesale bar. Normally, the answer is a number, 3 days, or by Friday. This time, the answer was a paragraph. It was full of polite, neutral-sounding phrases about logistical optimization and shifting regional demand. There was nothing alarming in the words themselves. No one said there was a shortage. No one said the vault was empty. But for the first time in a decade, the answer was a fog instead of a clear path. It was just different. It was the sound of an engine starting to cough before it actually stalls. That's when I stopped looking at the price, the thermometer, and the immune system. Most people spend their lives staring at the chart, convinced that the red and green candles are telling them the whole story. They think that as long as the price is flat, the market is at peace. But I've learned that the price is just a thermometer. It tells you the temperature, sure, but it doesn't tell you if the patient has a fever or if they've just been sitting in the sun. It's a lagging indicator of reality. I've stopped checking the temperature and started watching the immune system. Behavior is the market's immune system. It's the quiet surge in delivery requests, the sudden friction in warehouse transfers, and the way contracts are being shuffled behind the scenes. Price tells you what people agreed on yesterday. Behavior tells you what people are actually trying to do right now. And here's the part nobody warns you about. When behavior changes first, the price is usually the last thing to know. By the time the thermometer finally spikes, the infection has already taken hold. So let me tell you why this boring part of the market exists in the first place. Built for passersby. You have to realize that futures markets weren't actually built for people who want to put metal in their pockets. They were designed for the passersby, people who enter a position, wait for a price move, and exit with a check. Think of the silver market like a massive online hotel booking system. For 99% of the users, the goal isn't to actually sleep in the bed. They're just reserving rooms because they think the price of the stay will go up. And then they sell that reservation to someone else before check-in time. The system works beautifully because it assumes you are going to leave. It is optimized for cancellations and cash settlements, not for guests showing up at the front desk. But here is the part nobody tells you. The moment you decide not to leave, the moment you actually show up at the lobby with your luggage and demand the keys, you are no longer part of the math. You have become a glitch in a system that was built on the assumption that you would never actually arrive. The quiet shift. You won't see this on the evening news. There are no sirens, no flashing lights, no official announcements. Instead, the shift happens in the corners of the room. The delivery times for wholesale bars, which used to be a reliable 3-day window, quietly stretch to 2 weeks. The premiums, the extra amount you pay over the paper price to actually touch the metal, nudge up by a few cents, then a few more. The responses from the major bullion desks become just a little more polished, a little more vague. Nothing is wrong in a legal sense. No one is breaking the rules, but nothing is relaxed anymore. It's that heavy, static feeling in the air right before a summer storm, where the birds stop singing and the wind just dies. The system is still standing, but it's no longer breathing. The question that freezes the room. This brings us to the moment where the entire architecture of the modern market starts to look very fragile. In every financial meeting, in every boardroom, and in every trading floor, there is a core assumption that makes the world go round. Everyone has a price. We assume that if you offer someone enough cash, they will hand over the asset. It's the law of the land. But I want to ask you a question that usually freezes the room. What happens when people don't? Want the check? I'll let that sit for a second. Because that one question, that simple, quiet inquiry, breaks the fundamental assumption that everything else relies on. If the passersby suddenly decide to stay and the hotel is already overbooked, the pile of cash in your hand starts to feel less like a win and more like a consolation prize. 4. A game you no longer want to play. The weight of certainty. I want to talk about the difference between a promise and a thing. Because when you strip away the charts and the jargon, that's all we're really discussing. Cash, at its absolute best, is a high-quality promise. It's an agreement that later will look a lot like now, and that the person on the other side of the trade will be good for it. But a bar of metal? That's an object. It has mass. It occupies space. It doesn't require a counterparty to keep their word for it to exist. When uncertainty begins to hum in the background, something happens to the human brain. It stops looking for profit and starts looking for certainty. We stop caring about how much we can make and start caring about what we actually have. This isn't greed. Greed is loud. This is quiet. This is gravity. It is the natural, heavy pull of the physical world reasserting itself after years of living in the digital clouds. The architecture of the exit. This brings us to the reality of the trap. We've been conditioned to believe that the exit door is as wide as the room itself. That if we all decided to leave at 10 a.m., we could do so without bumping shoulders. Think of the silver market like a grand theater. It's a beautiful building, designed to hold thousands of people. For years, the shows have been great, and the exits have remained clear. But if you look closely at the floor plan, you'll notice something. The emergency exit is just a standard door. The door isn't locked. No one is committing fraud by keeping it small. It's just that the architecture was never designed for everyone to use it at once. The system was built on the statistical certainty that most people would stay in their seats until the lights came up. The trap isn't that the door has disappeared. The trap is the assumption that the door is a feature of your freedom, rather than a condition of the room's design. And when a few people in the front row quietly stand up and head for that door, the room doesn't stay quiet for long. I want to be very clear about what this trap actually is. Because if you're looking for a mustache-twirling villain or a secret room where the market is being rigged, you're going to be disappointed. The trap isn't a conspiracy. It's not even a collapse. The trap is the quiet, widespread belief that liquidity is a fundamental right, something as permanent and guaranteed as the color of the sky. We've spent decades operating under the assumption that we can always convert our digital promises back into physical reality without friction, at any volume, at any time. But liquidity isn't a feature of the market. It's a condition. It's like the tide. When it's in, the water looks deep and infinite, and you can swim anywhere you like. But the water isn't a permanent part of the beach. It's a temporary state. The trap is assuming the water will stay deep, even as everyone else starts heading for the shore. The shift in perspective. Since I started looking at the delivery window, I haven't become more frantic. I haven't started checking the ticker every 10 minutes with sweat on my palms. If anything, I've become much calmer. There is a strange kind of peace that comes from finally seeing the plumbing. You stop being a victim of the noise and start being an observer of the mechanics. You stop asking the loud, exhausting question, what will the price do? And you start asking the quiet, structural question, what is the system being asked to move? Once you make that shift, you realize that the price is just a distraction, a flicker of light on the wall of a cave. The real story is the movement of the mass. And in a world that has forgotten how to move heavy things, being the person who understands weight is the only real advantage left. For a long time, I thought the most dangerous moments in a market were the loud ones, the crashes, the spikes, the days everyone remembers. Now I'm not so sure. The moments that matter most seem to be the quiet ones, when nothing looks broken, when the price behaves, when the system politely insists that everything is fine. Because that's when you stop checking your assumptions. That's when you forget to ask a very simple question. If everyone wanted the same thing at the same time, could it actually be delivered? Most people never ask that question. Not because they're careless, but because the system has trained them not to. It works beautifully, as long as the question stays theoretical. But every once in a while, it stops being theoretical. And when that happens, nothing snaps, nothing collapses, nothing announces itself. The market doesn't scream. It just goes very, very still. And the people who understand the difference between a promise and a thing are already gone by. The time the silence becomes obvious.